Hello students, welcome to the lecture on deemed export and its benefits, and after this lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives. Describe the concept of deemed export, discuss the categories of supplies for deemed export, explain the benefits to the supplier and subcontractors, understand the procedure for claiming deemed exports. Let's start with the concept of deemed export and its benefits. Deemed exports refer to those transactions in which goods supplied do not leave country and payment for such supplies received either in Indian rupees or in free foreign exchange. It is essential for the goods to be manufactured in India for being eligible to be considered as deemed exports. Though the deemed exports are not physical exports, they are eligible for certain export-related facilities and benefits. Deemed export benefit scheme benefits are availed of by units in power, petroleum refinery, fertilizer and nuclear power projects. They are also availed by supply of goods to project financed by multilateral or bilateral agencies. The policy aims to create a level playing field for the domestic industry vis-a-vis direct import by providing duty-free imports or exemption or refund of duty paid on goods manufactured in India. Deemed export scheme is primarily an instrument for import substitution. It helps in creating manufacturing capability, value addition and employment opportunities in country. Actual export versus deemed exports. Actual export. Any shipment of physical items or the transmission of information abroad is an export that may be subject to the export control laws. Deemed export, the disclosure of controlled technical data to foreign nationals inside the United States, is a deemed export to the foreign national's home country. Let us now discuss the concept of deemed export. Deemed exports refers to those transactions in which goods supplied do not leave the country and payment for such supplies is received either in Indian rupees or in Foundation for Excellence FFE. It is of fundamental significance that at the time the existing United States deemed export regulation were established and subsequently modified, the commercial and national security environments bearing on the matter were vastly different from those that exist today. For example, the national security threat in the past could be associated with a block of identifiable, geographicable, determinable, largely self-isolated nations subject to deterrence through the threat of destruction. In contrast, the evolving threat includes but is not limited to diverse cells of geographically unattached non-governmental elements often composed of members who are seeking their own death as they carry out their mission. It is noteworthy that for at least the immediate future, this latter group will be largely dependent upon others for most forms of high technology weaponry to the extent they choose to employ such weaponry. In the evolving environment, unlike the recent past, denial of access to United States possessed knowledge can often be circumvented simply by obtaining it from others. Following categories of supplies by main or subcontractors shall be regarded as deemed exports under FTP, provided goods are manufactured in India. Supply of goods under advance authorization DFIA, supply of goods to EOUs, STPs, EHTPs or BTPs, supply of capital goods to holders of authorization under EPCG scheme, supply of goods to projects funded by multilateral or bilateral agencies of funds as notified by DEA, supply of capital goods to fertilizer plants, supply of goods to power projects and refineries, supply to projects funded by UN agencies and nuclear power plants, etc. Categories of exporters. There are various types of categories given here. Exporter means a person who exports or intends to export and holds an importer-exporter code number unless otherwise specifically exempted. Manufacturer, exporter. Manufacturer-exporter means a person who exports goods manufactured by him or intends to export such goods. Merchant-exporter. Merchant-exporter means a person engaged in trading activity and exporting or intending to export goods. A status holder means an exporter recognized as export house, trading house and PTH, etc. by DGTD or Development Commissioner. Supporting manufacturer means any person who manufacture any product or part or accessories, components of that product. Name of supporting manufacturer as well as exporter must be endorsed on export documents.
What is an export?
Sure. Well, we all know that an export is taking a book and putting it in a box and shipping it overseas to a friend. But if we take that same book and we scan pages of it and put it in an email and send it to someone, we're exporting it that way as well. Or if we get on the telephone and read that book to someone, even that is an export. So an export is way beyond that physical thing that we think about, going to the post office and mailing something, and can really impact us. There's also what's known as a deemed export, and these are particularly problematic for universities because a deemed export is when you disclose information to someone who's not a U.S. citizen or U.S. person. But if you disclose controlled information to them in the United States, that too is an export.
Why there are export controls?
Sure, Andy, and the primary reason for export controls is national security. These rules, which are quite broad, are meant to protect Americans, they're meant to protect our allies, and to prevent harm from coming to the United States. That's the primary reason. There are also other reasons the government has export controls, and that can include protecting certain foreign policy interests against certain countries, as well as protecting U.S. economic.
Now moving on to the next topic, we will study the categories of supplies for deemed exports. Following categories of supply of goods by main or subcontractors shall be regarded as deemed exports under FTP provided goods are manufactured in India. Supply of goods against advanced authorization for annual requirement, DFIA. Supply of goods to EOU, STP, EHTP, BTP, supply of capital goods to EPCG, authorization holders, supply of goods to projects financed by multilateral or bilateral agencies, funds as notified by Department of Economic Affairs, DEA, MOVE, funder international competitive bidding ICP in accordance with procedures of those agencies or funds where legal agreements provide for tender evaluation without including customs duty, supply installation of goods and equipment, single responsibility of turnkey contracts to projects financed by multilateral or bilateral agencies or funds as notified by DEA, MO funder ICB in accordance with procedures of those agencies or funds which bids may have been invited and evaluated on the basis of delivered duty paid DDP prices for goods manufactured abroad. Supply of capital goods including in unassembled or disassembled condition as well as plants, machinery, accessories, tools, dies and such goods which are used for installation purpose still stage of commercial production and spares to extent of 0% of value to fertilizer plants. Finding of deemed exports. The evolving security and commercial environment, the long-established regulation that control deemed export appear today to possess a number of shortcomings. The committee's findings in this regard are: the current deemed export regulation have become increasingly irrelevant to the prevailing global situation. In the present environment, more scientific and technological knowledge and items will not be denied to enemies even by a perfect United States control regime. They will simply be obtained from others. The current commerce control list is too all-encompassing, covering a vast spectrum of militarily less important items ranging from police handcuffs to hunting rifles and from conventional radios to mass-market computers. The existing regulations are excessively complex and often vague. For example, the results products of fundamental research are not subject to the existing deemed export regulatory regime, but knowledge relating to the operation of laboratory equipment used in prosecuting that same research may be subject to such control. Many academic and industrial organizations appear to be unaware of the deemed export rules or to have found means to conduct their affairs without being subject to them. Typically, only about 900 deemed export license requests are submitted to the United States government each year, of which about 85% are eventually approved. Some 15% are returned to the request or without action because a license was not required, the application was incomplete, or the existence of some other complicating factor. There appear to be many escapements to the existing regulatory regime. A foreign-born individual who becomes a United States citizen and then returns to his or her native country, perhaps with dual citizenship, is not covered by the deemed export regulation. Correspondingly, United States citizens are exempt from these regulations, yet most cases involving export violation of all types of which the committee is aware involved United States citizens. Similarly, material presented in a classroom containing foreign nationals in not covered by the deemed export licensing rules if the course is broadly available and advertised in a university catalog. Some regulations appear not to withstand tests of logical consistency. For example, a major debate has swirled around the use of the word "or" as opposed to the word "and" in the definition of use technology set forth in the EAR. If use is defined as it has been in the past, only information necessary for the operation, installation, maintenance, repair, overhaul and refurbishing of an item is subject to regulation. Thus, if any one of these functions is not involved, the information is not considered use technology that is subject to regulation. In fact, effort in support of almost all recent research activity conducted in the nation's universities has been exempted in large part based on this criterion. But the question arises as the fundamental efficacy of such a protective scheme when two individuals acting in coalition should each work on, say, 3 of the function, thereby gaining full knowledge of all 6 without triggering a deemed export licensing requirement all. The criteria for assessing the potential threat that might be posed by a foreign national who is the subject of a license application and his loyalty is uncertain under superficial. Under current practice, a very short list of proscribed, generally terrorist supporting countries is maintained by the United States government. However, a far longer list is maintained of countries which must be consulted for deemed export purposes. Matches against the latter list are based on the individuals in question's current citizenship or legal permanent residency. This also contrasts with the proposal by the Department of Commerce Inspector General whereby a match would also be made against birth citizenship. In any case, inadequate distinction seems to be made between an individual who, say, was born and raised in Iran but only recently became a citizen of the UK and an individual who was born in Iran but moved to the UK and became a citizen of the latter nation shortly after birth. Additionally, it would seem to be important to consider where an individual resided during his or her entire lifetime, not just where he or she was born or where his or her current citizenship has been granted. It is noteworthy that the current BIS interpretation is that the deemed export rule does not apply to persons lawfully admitted for permanent residence, that is green card holders, wherever their prior residences may have been. Given the complex and relatively arcane nature of the existing deemed export regulation, it is the view of the committee that the Department of Commerce and its Bureau of Industry and Security have done a truly remarkable job in seeking to carry out their assigned responsibilities in a balanced, professional fashion. Benefits for deemed exports. Deemed exports shall be eligible for any or of following benefits in respect of manufacture and supply of goods qualifying as deemed export subject to terms and conditions as in HBP V1. Advance authorization or advance authorization for annual requirement DFIA, deemed export drawback, exemption from terminal excise duty where supplies are made against ICB. In other cases, refund of terminal excise duty will be given. Exemption from TED shall also be available for supplies made by advance authorization holder to a manufacturer holding another advance authorization if such manufacturer in turn supplies the products to an ultimate exporter. Benefits to deemed export. Respect of supplies made against advance the supply authorization DFIA in terms of supply of goods against advance authorization or advance authorization for annual requirement or DFIA of FTP supplier shall be entitled to advance authorization DFIA for intermediate supplies. If supplies are made against advance release order ARO or back-to-back letter of credit issued against advance authorization, DFIA in terms of FTP suppliers shall be entitled to benefits listed in paragraph 6.2b and clause C of FTP wherever is applicable. Foreign Trade Policy FTP. The Foreign Trade Policy FTP 2009-14 was announced on 27 August 2009 in the backdrop of a fall in India's export due to the global slowdown. The immediate and the short-term objective of the policy was to arrest and reverse the declining trend of export as well as to provide additional support especially to those sectors which were hit badly by recession in the developed world. The policy envisaged an annual export growth of 15% with an annual export target of INR 10,000 billion by March 2011 and to come back on the high export growth path of around 25% per annum in the remaining 3 years of this foreign trade policy, that is up to 2014. The long-term policy objective for the government is to double India's share in global trade by 2020. As an immediate relief, the government provided a policy environment through a mix of measures including fiscal incentives, institutional changes, procedural rationalizations and efforts for enhanced market access across the world and diversification of export markets. Towards achieving these objectives, several steps were announced in the policy. Some of the important steps include the addition of new markets under the Focus Market Scheme, coverage of Africa, Latin America and large part of Oceania under Focus Market Scheme (FMS) and the Market Linked Focus Product Scheme (MLFPS), increase in incentives available under the Focus Market Scheme from 2.5% to 3% and for Focus Product Scheme (FPS) and MLFPS from 1.25% to 2%, introduction of EPCG scheme at zero duty for specified sector. Let us now know the meaning of benefits to the supplier and subcontractor. Supplier, in case of power projects, shall be eligible for benefits listed earlier, whichever is applicable. In case of mega power projects, suppliers shall be eligible for benefits whichever is applicable. For the supply of capital goods and spares, up to 10% of for value of capital goods to power projects shall be entitled for deemed export benefits provided the ICB procedure is followed. Benefits of deemed exports are also available for renovation or modernization. Subcontractor may, however, make supplies to main contractor instead of supplying directly to designated projects or agencies. Supplies made by an Indian subcontractor of an Indian or foreign main contractor directly to the designated projects or agencies shall also be eligible for deemed exports benefits provided name of subcontractor is indicated either originally or subsequently in the main contract but before the date of supply of such goods and payment certificate is issued by project authority in the name of subcontractor. Procedure for claiming deemed exports. Supply of goods will be eligible for refund of terminal excise duty provided recipient of goods does not avail cent VAT credit or rebate on such goods. Similarly, supplies will be eligible for deemed export drawback provided cent VAT credit facility or rebate has not been availed by applicant. Such supplies will, however, be eligible for deemed export drawback on custom duty paid on inputs component. Simple interest at the rate 6% per annum will be payable on delay in refund of duty drawback and terminal excise duty under deemed export scheme, if the case is not settled within 0 days of receipt of complete application. On command, deemed export benefits shall be available for suppliers under category clause D of categories of supplies for deemed exports only. On steel, deemed export benefits shall be available only for supply clause A under category D of categories of supplies for deemed exports or clause B as an input under an advance authorization or annual advance authorization or DFIA or clause C as an input to an EOC for making goods. On fuel, deemed export benefits is available only for supplies to clause A, petroleum operation, customs notification number 12/2012, custom dated 17/03/2012 or to EOUs or clause C to advance authorization holder or annual advance authorization holder. Over the years, various concerns have been raised over the interpretation and application of the deemed export regulation. Many of these concerns were alleviated by a National Security Decision, Directive and SDD 189 issued on September 21, 1985 that clarified the definition of fundamental research, a very large and important category that was thereby excluded from deemed export regulation. Fundamental research was defined as comprising basic and applied research in science and engineering, the results of which ordinarily are published and shared broadly within the scientific community. The output or product of such research is not subject to BIS deemed export regulation as set forth in the Export Administration Regulation. The result of this interpretation was to greatly reduce the potential demands on the academic community and to a much lesser degree the industrial community to comply with the deemed export regulation, because the result of virtually all academic research ordinarily are published and shared broadly within the scientific community, or at least so intended. In March 2004, the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Commerce recommended modifications of another major interpretation of the EAR having to do with so-called use technology to be discussed later, that would have the potential to vastly expand the number of activities subject to deemed export licensing. In response to this and other recommendations of the Inspector General in 2005, the Bureau of Industry and Security (BIS) sought public comments prior to making any revision. A large number of concerns were raised throughout the industrial and academic communities. Recognizing the contentiousness and complexity of the deemed export issue, BIS determined in May 2006 that a broad independent assessment should be conducted of the overall deemed export regulatory regime. To conduct this review, a federal advisory committee was established comprising individuals with experience. This issue in government, business, educational, research, and national and homeland security matters. The present document constitutes the report of that committee based on its discussions with government officials, national security personnel, educators, industrialists, association executives, and members of the public. Both classified and unclassified presentations were received by the committee. A total of 6 meetings were held. Public input was solicited and received at each meeting. It is noted that several other ad hoc committees are currently studying various aspects of the United States export policy, including one under the auspices of the National Research Council Committee on Scientific Communication and National Security, one under the auspices of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and one recently completed effort by the National Research Council Committee on a new government-university partnership for science and security. Now, in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. Deemed exports refer to those transactions in which goods supplied do not leave country and payment for such supplies is received either in Indian rupees or in free foreign exchange. Deemed exports scheme benefits are availed of by units in power, petroleum refinery, fertilizer and nuclear power projects. The national security threat in the past could be associated with a block of identifiable, geographically determinable, largely self-isolated nations subject to deterrence through the threat of destruction. Supply of capital goods, including in unassembled, disassembled condition, as well as plants, machinery, accessories, tools, dyes, and such goods which are used for installation purpose, still stage of commercial production, and spares to extent of 0% of value to fertilizer plants. Benefits of deemed exports are also available for renovation or modernization.